The force of nature that plunged an entire state into darkness. Tornado-like swirls ripped transmission towers right from the ground, causing an unprecedented collapse, leaving 1.7 million people without power.
I would have been 17 50 years ago, and I can't remember anything like this ever.
We've experienced some weather conditions that have not been seen before in this state, such as twin tornadoes, which ripped through the northern parts of our state.
The city was a scene of absolute chaos. With no traffic lights, cars were gridlocked.
Shocking, half hour to get to where we are, and we're only 10 minutes from home.
Tried to drive home, ended up parking about halfway home and just walking the rest of the way.
Office workers poured onto the streets, people queued for buses, knowing they might never arrive.
The city's gridlocked, so we can't get home.
No trains, trams, or access to fuel.
The petrol stations are all closed, and can't get any fuel.
Shops had no choice but to close their doors.
Oh, it's not that good. Power is off, fridge is off.
Parts of the island could get more than 20 inches of rain that will cause catastrophic flooding. The storm also expected to hit Cuba and the Bahamas before moving north.
Powerful winds and relentless rain slammed the Bahamas, making it clear Hurricane Matthew had arrived. Snapshots from Great Inagua show the storm's power. Homes damaged, streets covered in debris, trucks tossed on their side. The aftermath in Haiti shows the devastating power of Matthew. Buildings in Jeremy are nearly destroyed. Many roofs were ripped clean off.
The death toll has climbed in Haiti, but we don't know the true number. We've actually been getting conflicting reports that range anywhere from 200 people to 600 people. But you're going to agree with us that no matter what that number winds up being, this is a humanitarian crisis. There are so many people that are still missing because the government has yet to get reports from some of the worst affected areas, and the rescuers can't even get to some of these people who need the assistance the most. Thousands of homes have been damaged, if not completely destroyed. So many roads are completely impassable. This is definitely the country's largest disaster since the earthquake of 2010, and so many people have yet to recover from that, even though it was 6 years ago.
Cleanup operations are ongoing this afternoon after Typhoon Chaba swept through the southern part of Korea on Wednesday, leaving a trail of destruction. At least 7 people died and 3 are missing after the region was lashed by torrential rain and powerful winds. Lee Min-young starts us off.
The Korean peninsula is no longer under the direct influence of Typhoon Chaba, but the southern parts of Korea that were battered by the storm are still grappling with rescue and recovery operations. And more reports on the extent of the damage are still coming in. 3 casualties were reported in Busan. Among them is a construction worker who was killed after a crane toppled over, and an elderly woman who died after falling from the roof of her house. 3 casualties were reported in the nearby city of Ulsan, which was also slammed with torrential rain and powerful winds. The General Insurance Association of Korea reported Wednesday the typhoon caused more than $9 million in damages. More than 500 homes have been flooded and more than 1,600 vehicles submerged. Around 230,000 homes suffered power outages, and dozens of cultural properties were damaged. Almost 200 people from 90 households were forced to evacuate, and they are currently staying at local schools and community centers. Industrial plants were also affected by the typhoon. 2 Hyundai Motor plants in Ulsan and 20 other industrial facilities in the area were forced to suspend operations for a while due to the flooding. The storm, which has been downgraded to a tropical depression, is currently affecting parts of Japan. President Park Geun-hye has called for swift restoration measures to minimize the damage. The government also said it is considering designating the affected regions as special disaster areas. If so, local residents would be able to receive emergency relief and special administrative and financial support from the government. The city of Gyeongju was designated as a special disaster area following 2 powerful earthquakes that hit the region last month.
Days after strong winds brought by Hurricane Matthew battered the eastern seaboard of the United States and flooding has displaced thousands of people in North Carolina. Nearly 4,000 have been taken to refuge shelters, leaving businesses flooded and homes with water up to their roof lines. Governor Pat McCrory has warned of extremely dangerous conditions in the coming days, where several rivers are at record levels. 35 people in the state have already died as a result of the storm.
Do not go through water. We've had over 10 people killed as a result of that. We're not messing around, and we do not want to put people at risk to save you once you make that decision. Too many people have died.
In South Carolina, about 532,000 homes are still without power. That's down from 2.2 million on Sunday. However, disaster declarations in both Carolinas, North and South, have been made by President Barack Obama, which will make federal funding available to people in the hardest hit areas.
Is bearing down on the island of Bermuda. The National Hurricane Center calls a Category 3 storm extremely dangerous, with maximum sustained winds of 20 miles per hour. This is actually a view of Nicole from the International Space Station. The British territory is getting pounded with strong winds, heavy rain, and damaging storm surge.
When Nicole slammed ashore, it was one of the most fierce storms I've ever been through, and I think this is my 5th hurricane. The trees were bent sideways. I literally could not stand up in the wind. That's how fierce it was.
Typhoon Haima, measuring 8 out of 10 on the authorities' severe storm scale, shut down Hong Kong on Friday morning, closing schools, businesses, stock markets and offices. The city's streets were deserted as nearly 200 trees were blown down by wind gusting at more than 100 kilometers an hour. A 50-year-old man was reported dead after falling and hitting his head on a rock by the seafront, and between 8 and 12 injuries were also reported. At the airport, over 700 flights were cancelled, and the city was estimated to have lost more than $500 million in revenue. In eastern Taiwan, low-lying roads were flooded as heavy rain hit. Meanwhile, in the northern Philippines, people began returning to their homes after Haima, the strongest storm in 3 years, hit them. It left a trail of destruction that killed at least 12 people after triggering flooding, landslides and power cuts. Evacuations of high-risk communities helped prevent a larger number of casualties.
80,000 households suffered from initial blackouts there. There are reports of structural damage to homes, but only a handful of minor injuries have been reported so far. Several major highways are closed while the damage is assessed. No tsunami warning has been issued.
Of aftershocks that have hit central Italy. This happened just a couple of hours ago. It's knocked out power in areas and some places as far as Rome, which is about 150 kilometers from the center of where this aftershock first occurred. People are able to feel those aftershocks. There's been power that's been knocked out, as we've said. Let's get you straight to Sabina Castelfranco. She's a CBS News reporter.
A series of strong tremors have struck central Italy. A 6.0 magnitude quake struck 2 hours after a 5.4 magnitude quake was recorded. The epicenters for both quakes were near Castellangelo sul Nera in the Marche region, and both were felt as far away as Rome, some 150 kilometers to the south. Early reports suggest some older buildings suffered damage. However, it was not on the scale of a major quake which hit the region in August. The 6.2 magnitude earthquake leveled a small number of towns and killed nearly 300 people.